Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. Foul. I can't believe
that. Good time of day, whenever you're listening to this, wherever you're listening from. This is episode 207 of Americans Watching the Footy. I'm Ethan Castle, coming to you from South San Francisco, California.
I am Benjamin Castle, coming to you from scorching San Diego, California. It hit the triple digits here today.
And I would also like to introduce our new voice actor, Aquafina.
Yeah, I've never been so hot and cold at the same time.
I just have a voice actor in like everything now, so I just wanted to feel included.
So 100 degrees Fahrenheit is, what, I think around 38 Celsius.
I don't know, because I'm not a communist. I believe in freedom.
Well, yeah, it was hot today is the point. It is close to the end of summer, but doesn't quite feel like it yet. I was just really happy, though, that I was able to watch all the footy this week and that I had somebody to watch with. Got my housemate Dana to watch along with me for Sydney Derby 29. We'll talk more about that and just what she thought of the game as we go through things here. But we have two games to take care of before that. And Ethan, I would imagine that you are pretty happy.
Yeah, I thought this was winnable. I thought, I don't know, by like 3 to 4 goals max. But Port Adelaide 7-12-54 defeated by Geelong 2018-138. We tore them apart.
84 is
the new 119.
Okay, Louis, take it away.
Whoa! Where did that come from? Whoa!
That was my thought at first, too. Like, I actually referenced that on the Hoops Crew post game in case you missed it. This was really just best case scenario, everything except set shot kicking. I had said Tanner Bruhn was a huge key. He was great. The whole midfield was outstanding. I thought Patrick Dangerfield was sensational. Max Holmes, I thought he was pretty darn good. He drew a lot of positive reviews. Absolutely loved Zach Guthrie's performance. The way he was able to not just intercept, but then launch attacks out of the back. Only one coach's vote for Zach Guthrie. That seems wrong. And, oh yeah, Tom Stewart was a somewhat laid out. A few hours before the game, reports came out that he was going to miss. There were some concerns about his hamstring carrying back to the final game of the home and away season. Instead, he was sick, like to the point that they did not want him around the team and they sent him on a different flight home.
Is it COVID?
No, I think that would have probably been noted. So it was just like flu stuff.
By the way, they still say, at least in America, health and safety protocols. Like major American leagues still say that.
I mean, COVID and flu symptoms can be pretty similar so for all you know, could have been, but nothing said that. All I know is he didn't play and I was concerned, and then there was no reason to be concerned. Whenever I've not trusted lineup decisions this year, generally my intuitions have been correct, and they were not here. I thought I was going to get Sam De Koning in, and it would have been just the simple, somewhat like-for-like move. Instead, they bring in O'Sheen Mullen to tag, and he was excellent. Didn't have much of the ball himself, but did exactly what you wanted of him. Totally shut down first Zach Butters, and then the horny one, Jason Horne-Francis.
Here he is again, the horny one!
Still had his moments, but really didn't have much of an impact. And he switched off of Butters because Butters came out of the game at halftime.
Yeah, that was rib bruising. Scans revealed nothing significant. He could be good to go for this coming weekend. That I think will be pretty necessary considering what Hawthorn can bring in the midfield. Now, I know there was a late injury concern as well around O'Sheen, maybe regarding his hamstring. Haven't seen much follow-up about that, but 2 weeks and a day, if not 2 to get ready for the prelim against the winner of another game. So no spoilers yet.
I don't know how anyone would be listening to this and not be aware of the potential matchups. That would be pretty fascinating, honestly.
Remember, we have that one listener out in beautiful Turkmenistan, and they're like the only footy access they get.
Port had a brief lead at 37-35. Cats then kicked 4 straight and could have opened things up more, but again, set shot kicking was not very good. Port gets the final goal of the half. Seems like they have a little bit of momentum off of that. I believe that was a Connor Rosie goal. Yeah, it was.
And then, nope, 5-0 in the third, and it was 5-7. So Geelong could have really piled it on, but a 55-point margin at three-quarter time. The game was over, especially without Butters there. And yes, excellent throughout the whole midfield group in terms of at the center and going wider as well. Holmes got the perfect 10. I think that was because of just a lot of his ground gaining. No, not a lot of his possessions were contested, but the ground he gained and the speed he had were huge factors. He always has the speed, but he had the cleanliness in this game that had been missing really since, I want to say, June in a lot of instances. And then big props as well to Sean Mannett, who I'm surprised we hadn't mentioned yet, for his 3-1 from 23, 13 scored involvements, 3 assists, and 528 meters gained. This is the best game that he's played yet. I mean, we know he's a finals performer at VFL level. He's now done it at AFL level also. Keeping him out for as long as they did just looks stupider and stupider now. But hey, they are in a prelim all the same. They'll be hosting one at the G. And yeah, it was speed that was so important for Geelong. And that kind of surprised me, not just because of the general idea of this being a slower team, but also that Port could usually counter that. Instead, you had the sprints from Holmes and Dangerfield and the cleanliness thereafter, combined with the undermanned defense without Dan Houston and Kane Farrell, and no real proper solution there anywhere on the list, but also I don't think any great in-game moves either. And Port just gradually had the life sucked out of them, and I think the rest of it was gone when Butters was subbed out. Regarding the half-back adjustments, they moved Darcy Bird-Jones back, and I think that was a poor move because of the pressure that he provides in the forward half, and that he's been one of their better goal kickers as well. I would have liked for Josh Singh to have gotten a chance, and for him and Jace Burgoyne to have traded off a bit. I think the fewer disruptions, the better, generally, and I think just they didn't have any other viable options on the list for it, I think.
Speaking of cleanliness, Zach Guthrie, 96.3% efficiency, and that was with about a third of his possessions being contested. Dangerfield, half of his possessions were contested. He still hit 75%. I love Jack Bowes just rising up against a really good midfield because, I've said one of the concerns with him, he's played really good games against lesser midfields, but hasn't really done it against the best of the best. This game he did. Also, Jack Henry really had the back on lock and deserves credit once again. Over the final quarter of the season, he played really well, and I was sure to mention it and credit him. After being very critical of him for most of the year, he's totally turned it around. Forwards, it was a pretty healthy mix. Jeremy Cameron hit a couple of really difficult goals and then missed a couple set shots he usually knocks through. He and Tyson Stengel each with 4. He got a couple late, but Gryan finished with 3. Mana, in addition to his 3, also had 3 assists. Just pretty much best case scenario performance in so many areas. If I had to pick something that wasn't great, I guess, Jed Muse would have probably been the least remarkable. And even he did a solid job, shutting down Willie Rioli largely after the last meeting. It was nobody fucking paid attention to him at all.
So what is the move then? Because you'd expect Sam DeConing to be back, obviously, for the prelim, and I think that should be the only change. Yes, Tom Hawkins is healthy. Yes, Cameron Guthrie is healthy. Don't care. The mix is working, especially with Shannon Neal in there and just providing more dimension, I think, laterality than Hawkins does at this point.
I think it's going to have to be wait and see who you're playing and figure out, do you need Mullen to tag? Do you need Beers to match up with smaller forwards? I think it's going to be a matchup thing. I was surprised Mark Blitzov's got so much love in the coaches' votes. I thought he was very good, but I didn't think he did anything like that special. He did completely run circles around Charlie Dixon, but I thought there were other guys that were more consequential. This was a good game out of Blitzov's, and just a reminder that he can play like every role possible.
I liked how he played defensively on Charlie Dixon, and that's just a really advantageous matchup for him. You knew that was going to be a matchup because that's just a second ruck thing, and Dixon was completely outclassed. He doesn't have the running stamina of, wait for it, a former steeplechaser.
It was to the point that I would totally consider getting Todd Marshall in for him this week. I think you got to find a way to get Marshall in. And I don't know if you just go Marshall for him or if you drop Quentin Narkle and maybe demote Francis Evans to the sub. He just didn't do much in this game. None of the former Cats did. Narkle was very quiet. Asava, love the guy, but 6 disposals.
Asava helped the Cats.
I don't think he so much actively helped, but he definitely didn't hurt. You know who was a positive for Port? I think easily their best player in this game, and we don't have a polished term for finals, but deserves some mention, was Miles Bergman, who was their best defender. Alir was okay, didn't dominate like last time. Bergman was actually pretty good, led them in intercepts. I did like his performance.
You know, he's the type of guy who really looks like he could use a thin headband.
Yes.
I believe he's out of contract after next year.
We were talking about possible replacements for Geelong. I can tell you who won't be one of them is Gary Rowan, because he not only got concussed down in the VFL, he has a skull fracture.
Unfortunately, that may spell the end of his career. He is out of contract after this year.
Speaking of older guys that are towards the end but not at the end, I thought Mitch Duncan had one of his better games. Wasn't like remarkable, but just very reliable. And that's kind of how I already feel about Lawson Humphreys, where like I'm already taking him for granted because he's just very consistent and has an insanely high floor. You know how a lot of times it's been like we've noted how the Cats win when they don't get 30 disposals from an individual player? Well, I have another stat that they seem to be doing just fine with. When the opposing ruckman is 50 plus hitouts, they keep winning.
Were they just content to let the ball fall where they may and just let Port make the first mistake?
No, it was more just reading and reacting well, I think. But I will say, for his 51 hitouts, Jordan Sweet had 1 clearance. I did not feel like he had 15 hitouts to advantage. Reece Stanley, 28 hitouts, but 5 clearances. And I thought he did just fine in that matchup, if not actually winning it. And this was kind of true all over the ground, not just in the middle, but there was a lot of read and react that the team did very well. But I think when this team is clicking, that's something that they are as good at as anybody, if not the best at, just within this year's team. And like a lot of times when they've beaten teams out, it hasn't so much been like, running over teams. I mean, there was certainly an aspect of that here, but that this group is really good at just like read and react. That Butters injury, I don't know if I ever said, but like going into halftime, my perspective was, man, could have been up more with set shots, and it's really annoying to give up that last goal, but get the first couple of the third quarter and you're in really good shape. And then after finding out that he was done for the game, I thought, all right, get the first 2 and you can really bury them. And then they got more than the first 2. And I actually kind of love that set shot kicking wasn't good. You think about next time you're going to play, it's highly unlikely to play like this for a second consecutive game. I mean, they've done it in finals before without the week off in between, but you don't bank on that, but you bank on set shot kicking generally being something that evens out. That this team has shown that, and it would be a pretty nice thing to have in your back pocket, just confidence and expectation. And yes, set shots are probably going to be a little bit better next game.
I want Port to win next week. I don't think it's going to happen.
I think they have a chance, but
I think the lack of a defensive solution, honestly, with or without Houston or Farrell in this case, is going to haunt them unless Bergman and Alir are both able to play out of their minds. But I just mostly want Port to win to make sure Hinckley stays there and isn't involved in the Eagles conversation at all.
I think you don't need that much more out of Bergman. Could use a better game out of Alir. Could also use anything out of Brandon Zerk-Thatcher, who had one of his poor games. Like there is totally a blueprint for Port to be a lot better and win this game. I'm skeptical at this point.
So who are Port playing? Well, for that one Turkmen listener out there, listen to this. In the second elimination final on Friday night in front of an elimination final record crowd of 97,828, Western Bulldogs 9-8-62 defeated by Hawthorn 14-15-99. I was blown away firstly by the crowd itself. I thought, in the 90,000 range, there is a bit of rain in the forecast for early in the game. 97,828. I might be like BT here about this.
You know what I think does it is that it's the only final in Victoria in the first 2 weeks. And I mean, we knew regardless of what happened the night before that there were going to be just 3 finals in Victoria total, including the grand final. So I think scarcity was the main factor there. And this was a pretty good mix, probably about 50-50-ish split.
Nah, I think it favored Hawthorn.
I mean, you also, a color like gold stands out.
Still, though, even before the game got out of hand, I was thinking probably 60-40 Hawthorn. And then Hawthorn just flipped the game in the second quarter, 5-1, and kept that dominance the whole way. The forward numbers definitely helped, and they were helped also just by not having to contend with Marcus Bontempelli in the midfield. Why was he at center half forward? And why did that not change until it was far too late?
Seriously, you guys? The fuck?
This is one of those games where we feel very validated for our Luke Beveridge criticism.
Both coaches who lost their elimination finals this week committed some sackable offenses. That's one of them. That's the primary one for Beveridge. Everything else is just kind of exposing some of the defensive issues for this team if not everybody plays at the top of their abilities. I like James O'Donnell more so as a ball mover, but Cal Shadir was far too much for him for the whole game. It was 3-4 for Deer, and he missed some easier ones, but just was his normal sort of destructive self in a positive way for Hawthorn.
He was not just impacting marking contests, he was actually marking. James O'Donnell, solid ball mover, former cricketer, not someone that you're actually asking to defend in a one-on-one matchup. And he was totally miscast in that. I've been skeptical of him most of the year, and that definitely continued here.
Yasap Buku.
Also, bringing James Harms back in for the first time in 3 months, and he did what exactly other than a nice mark that really didn't affect anything. So it was pretty late in the game. Keeping Jack McRae in the sub role and leaving him out way too long, and then bringing him in for another largely ineffective player, but I would have taken out Harms. Instead, they took out Harvey Gallagher. And this team really lacked any sort of small spark plug candidate other than Cody Wakeman. And when he's kind of just the only one, it's a little bit easier to contain.
We've seen a lot this year how teams have struggled with any more than one small spark plug player, and there are a lot of teams in finals that have those. The Giants are one. The Hawks are definitely another with Ginnivan, Watson. McDonald honestly plays a bit smaller, even though he's pretty versatile. And you didn't have anybody on the other side except for Waitman, who honestly plays taller than he is. So that's another reason why we were advocating for Arthur Jones to have kept his spot. And I think it's making more sense now.
Riley Garcia also could have helped with that. Had, I thought, a really nice season and was getting dropped when he totally didn't deserve it.
Oh, no, Riley West either. That's another one that surprised me.
I know he was coming off of, what was it, a broken jaw or cheekbone or something, right?
Yes, but I thought he was good to go. I might be mistaken there. If he was good to go, then that's a puzzling decision to leave him out, because we've seen him both kick for and play good defensive jobs. Actually, in the same game, he was able to do that once this year.
And facial injuries also are something that doesn't affect your trading as much. You can still totally run and do all of those things.
We saw how quickly Darragh Joyce came back in for the Lions after breaking his jaw. That was only 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, so that did not make much sense. This was very on brand for what we consider the Bulldogs' issues. Combine that with just a very effective and strong game out of the Hawthorn midfield. Lloyd Meek, knocking around Tim English, who had just altogether, an unimpressive season. Taylor DeRay playing like a double agent.
Fitting. This was a top-tier game out of Newcomb, particularly his third quarter was off the charts.
Yeah, 11 disposals second quarter and then 15 in the third. And I know disposal count by itself isn't everything, but he was the superior midfielder in this game. I was surprised he only was credited with 3 clearances. James Sicily was really sharp as well, just in ball movement and marking, impacting the game on different spots.
Sicily really benefited, I think, from having that week off. We know he's been carrying some problems with his shoulder. He dislocated it earlier in the year, and that had definitely limited him in terms of his intercepting ability. Yeah, he was back to his normal self. Having him and Jarman Ify be able to do that, that's awesome. I love when there are multiple launching points and you have multiple guys who can venture pretty far downfield and also change. These Hawks go a good bit further.
Josh Ward, who was the in for Cam McKenzie, really solid. Harry Morrison continued his run that started when he was a late in and had been really like in a marginal role this year. And then all of a sudden, it's like, boom, you're the guy. Harry! He's just been sensational, honestly. Harry Morrison's improvement over the last month or so is probably one of the coolest stories out of this team.
He was the late in for Chenklith Jaff in round 22 in that thrashing of the Blues, and he hasn't looked back. And now, as awesome as he is, CJ can't get back in. There will be a change needed in defense for the semifinal, and that's because Sam Frost, unfortunately, has bone stress in his foot and is done for the year.
Unit lost.
But that's not the place where CJ would be coming in. It would be one of Jai Sarong, who's that excellent forward for Box Hill, or Ethan Phillips, who I believe played his one AFL game thus far against Port.
Nick Watson has continued. Remember I had said, let's make sure to get our shots in at him while we can because he's going to learn how to kick goals, and he has. He ended up with 4, which is his new career high. And there was a whole section of Hawthorn fans with wizard hats for him, except they only put them on when he was about to take a set shot, which just looked really dorky.
I guess otherwise they just would have blocked the view too much. I don't know. I did love that someone tossed one onto the ground after the game and Jack Ginnivan just slammed it onto Nick's head during his interview.
And now that I've seen them with some success, though, I get what it is that a lot of people, well, I think this mostly speaks to Geelong and Essendon, resent about Hawthorn. It's not like their fans necessarily do anything outrageously bad. They're just kind of twerps. Also, Nick Watson definitely within the last few years was the kid doing the stupid floss dance when they showed him on screen. And this whole Hawthorn team gives off the energy of kids that, tonight's going to be a movie. But him especially.
They don't have to say it to make it happen, though.
This is the Skibbity, Ohio Riz Zoomer team.
That's unfortunately been established that they are the brain rot team.
If they embraced the Rizzler, I'll let it all go.
But yeah, Broden Kelly's helped establish them as the Gen Alpha brain rot team. So as Jared Wadley, it's here. By the way, for more talk about the Bulldogs and whoever else is out after this weekend of finals, listen to our semifinals preview because we'll give our post-mortems for those teams who have lost their seasons.
I do want to mention the one Bulldog that I really liked in this game was Rory Law. It is nothing short of amazing that it took until his 11th season at his third club for someone to finally realize, oh, he's just an elite one-on-one defender. Was this hiding the entire time and we just didn't know? Or were teams just negligent to realize it? This deserves a lot of investigation.
We wondered if Hawthorn could win without Will Day. Not only did they win without Will Day, they won without much of an involvement at all from Dylan Moore.
That was the one game plan thing I think the Dogs did well. They did better than most any other team has in quite some time, was they took Dylan Moore out of the equation, and it just didn't matter. And if you had told me that would have happened, I would have felt like very, very good about the Dogs' chances, because you would think, all right, this is a team that can absolutely beat them in the midfield, and then they didn't beat them in the midfield. They just were bad.
And they did put Bontempelli in there.
Which is just an incredible decision. You know, what is the reasoning behind this? It's not like you don't have forwards.
You know, Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
Follow our thoughts outside of this show at Americans Footy on Twitter and on a few other social media platforms as well. Just look up Americans Footy or Americans Watching the Footy. You'll find them pretty much instantly because nobody else has our name yet. It's not like Soft Mega Fan 4. Individually, you can follow me on Twitter at BenjaminHK01. Got really into some of the college football this weekend as well, and not just Cal's win over Auburn. Go Bears.
I'm at Castle Media. Brian Harambe is on Instagram with cat named Brian. Make sure that you also literally follow us, but from a safe distance, maintain social distancing protocols and mask up.
So Sydney Derby 29, I was so glad that I have somebody to just watch football with of various codes, because my housemate Dana, I got her to watch this with me. We were already watching some American football because she's a Packers fan. So a couple hours in between games, and we got into this one, and now I feel like I'm going to let her down with literally every other game ever. We've talked about this, Ethan, where you don't want to show somebody an S tier game, even like an A plus tier game right away. Show them like a solid B plus, A minus, where there isn't anything crazy at the end. This had craziness at the end and throughout the game, as the Sydney Swans 13-10-88 got their first finals win over the Greater Western Sydney Giants 12-10-82. Isaac Heaney, what an incredible game, and the highlights were there too. This is a game where even somebody who's watching a game seriously for the first time, like Dana, could spot, oh yeah, just this guy's been everywhere doing everything. Chad Warner, heroic in the fourth quarter. After being quiet for most of the proceedings, all 7 of his clearances were in the fourth, and that ties a finals record, I believe, with Chris Judd. Tom Papley, huge in contests and just pumping up the team as necessary. And Joe Lombardi getting the game-winning goal when so little had gone his way, really since his bag of 9, felt really satisfying. Big shout out also, of course, to Braden Campbell, who was a brilliant sub pick. And we also learned he was playing 2 days after his grandfather had died, and he was particularly close with him. He's the perfect sort of fresh legs sub, and his speed and accuracy batter everywhere on the oval. And that really shone through once he was brought on late in the third quarter.
I am convinced after you win a game in this fashion, it's like, this is their year.
The Giants brought the chaos early, as we knew they would, and that was a bit of a concern that we had going into the game for Sydney, despite their home and away meetings, and that they only scored 2-5 from the first quarter was very telling later on. I mean, easy 10 points left on the board from Toby Green and James Peatling, and just the general flow of play meant that they should have been up by well more than 7 points.
I will maintain that the Swans did much more to win this game than the Giants did to lose it from the late third quarter on. This was less of a collapse and more of just one team going insane. At least that's how I saw it. But if you want to look at a stretch where the Giants really lost this game and didn't help themselves, it would be that late first quarter. I guess the entire first quarter where they could have really put the hurt on.
I continuously found myself surprised by aspects of this game, even though we thought we knew what these teams would bring. How about a couple big involvements for Lockie Keefe? After being a little clumsy early, positive as a backup ruck and forward. Aaron Cadman showing his class and really maybe sort of a coming-of-age game for him despite the defeat. I think there were more surprises, honestly, for me for the Giants than the Swans, because, honestly, Justin McInerney being a bit slow and rusty on the comeback just wasn't surprising to me. And even Isaac Heaney's hanger, he's won Mark of the Year before.
What else was a surprise for me from GWS? Brent Daniels being very quiet. Could Jake McCarty come back this week, possibly? That would help.
For whom?
I don't know. Let's see. They subbed out
Toby McMullen, who kicked a goal from 7 and had 3 score involvements. That's not like for like at all. And you're already leaning somewhat tall there. I like having just the wealth of smalls as well.
I deeply regret not being able to watch this game live. Now, I could have probably watched it live-er, but I was at a high school football game working. What I did for that a couple of years ago, coming back from the exact same matchup, actually, for the Geelong Collingwood game, was I had my phone basically used as a radio and then watched pretty much live the rest of the way. I decided instead, I'm going to watch this in full from the start, totally locked in. But I ended up being well behind and found out what the score was at 3/4 time just because it, as I was doing stuff on Twitter, work related, it popped up, and then saw that you had tweeted, how good's Footy. It was okay, clearly something happened in the 4th quarter, and then it kind of became more clear as things went on, oh shit, the Swans are going to totally come back and win this. And I wish I had experienced it in real time. Nonetheless, still a really entertaining watch and kind of fun to see it through the lens of so that's how that happened. I just wish from being able to experience the whole emotional roller coaster of what I wish I was doing that live.
I tweeted how good's Footy after Isaac Heaney's game tying goal. Fuck, I can't believe that, because it was from the center square.
With the tying goal was the center square? Why did I think it was the go-ahead goal? Then what was the go-ahead goal? Was that Amarty?
That was Joel Amarty. And that was after Amarty had done something really smart. He saw Tom Papley running onto it and took an angle to cut off Sam Taylor. It wasn't a block or anything like that would be called. He didn't really make contact with him at all, I think. But let Papley do the work at ground level and got ready to take the shot, and he hit it.
I want to give Joel Amarty an enormous amount of credit for finding ways to work himself into this game when the ball wasn't coming to him. We've talked about that, in reference to Bobby Orchol, where sometimes he just needs to insert himself into the game, even if things aren't coming to him. And I totally saw Amarty doing that, making a couple of high effort plays, had a chase down tackle or two, and just made sure that he found other ways to do things. Matthias Filippo, I think we saw it, on a much more dramatic level. Or I guess dramatic wouldn't be the right word, because this was pretty dramatic, but in terms of a much higher volume, you've seen it from Filippo, but that Amarty has figured out how to do that is pretty impressive.
Harry Mackay at times too, especially last year.
I think he did it some this year. Last year was more just how can I get involved if I'm not making, hitting set shots? Now he's just now the full field impact has been more consistent.
Papley had a huge contest when leading up to that Heaney tie goal as well against Connor Iden. And then Nick Blakey halved, if not slightly won, a 1v2 before the game winner. This team supported each other really well in the 4th quarter. They finally got the speed from clearance, and I think Warner was a huge part of that. I mentioned earlier, all 7 of his clearances were in the 4th. They just hadn't had that burst off clearance before. Warner was there. Campbell was sometimes there. Jake Lloyd getting involved and then spreading to the wing, one of his most active games and a meaningful one in the end.
Despite the outcomes, I did really like how Jesse Hogan played. He's been on such a tear this year that it's you do everything you can to stop him, and he still gets his. And you just kind of have to accept it. I thought Jack Buckley was the best defender in this game, and my concerns about Sydney's defense do still kind of remain, although I like Dane Rampy. I didn't think their defense was particularly great. I know Tom McCartan did have one big moment later in the game, but overall still, like, I don't think he's had an especially good season. And then Darcy Jones continues to just make stuff happen.
Wealth of Smalls is going to be a matter of concern again going into the semifinal for their opposition. And that's why I would like for McMullen to stay in.
I think you got to get Riccardi back in there in some capacity.
For Keith, then, it seems like the only logical move.
Nah, I would just go Riccardi for McMullen. So yeah, tough one for GWS, to lose a final that you led by about 5 goals at times against your biggest rival, Gillette, until the very end of the game. And then the next night, New Mexico State had a 9-point lead with about half of the fourth quarter remaining and ended up blowing it and losing to Liberty. Fortunately, that's such a strange combination of teams. I couldn't possibly fathom anyone being a fan of both the GWS Giants and New Mexico State Aggies.
And also being from the hometown of and despising the university to whom they lost.
Yeah, surely a person like that does not exist. That's way too far-fetched to actually be a thing.
I mean, that's such a hypothetical. I'll go back, actually, to their last meeting with their semifinal matchup as we close our discussion on this game here. What Smalls did they have in there? Because, obviously, Binga was there. Toby Green. Okay, McMullen wasn't in there, and you had Keefe instead of Riccardi.
I just realized those teams, and this seems like a very Sir Swamp Thing question. When's the last time teams have played 3 different matchups in 3 different stadiums? I'm sure it wasn't that long ago because you have, some of the Victorian teams playing at Marvel instead of the G, but this will be their 3rd different venue this year.
A very Geelong thing.
Ooh, that's true. But yes, the first time these teams met was in Canberra, and the second was at the Gabba. There's your answer. There's your big reveal. Brisbane 14-15-99, defeating Carlton 11-5-71. I also did not experience this live, and I'm kind of disappointed I didn't, because it would have been fun, especially just I'm sure Twitter was really fun.
It was, and then for a bit, it wasn't, and then when the result wasn't in doubt, it wasn't. I mean, the result wasn't really ever in doubt, but there was just this period where the Lions went really quiet after a few misses, and they allowed 5 goals in a row with halftime in between. And, there was a flicker of doubt in there, but the Brisbane Lions went up 60-0 in the middle of the second quarter.
I mean, considering the way their opening round meeting went, and that last year Carlton had, the first 5 goals in the prelim, I get where the concern would be. 2 things really disappointed me about this game. One is that the siren didn't go on forever after, like it did when Brisbane beat Carlton last year. And 2 is just, the Blues knew that they were fighting an uphill battle coming to this game, and then just, resigned themselves to that. I didn't see much competitiveness at all out of Carlton. You can see a team just get their asses kicked, but they're still playing hard. And, I don't mean, I need to see them, try to start fights and stuff. They just looked like a team that just showed up yeah, we're here to get beat. Let's get it over with. And they just totally resigned themselves very early.
I don't think they resigned themselves that quickly, but it was, once you were down 60, it was obvious. They just looked flustered, and I will go back to what I said about why I didn't think the Blues would win the flag and why their stumbling block would be this week. Too many changes, and on top of that, just certain changes coming without being able to get games into guys beforehand. I loved seeing Sam Doherty back. Obviously, great that he had that fourth quarter goal, but the game was meaningless by that point. The game had been so lost by then. Adam Chera,
not woof.
You're going to send a guy with bad hamstrings to tag Lucky Neal?
How about the sub decision?
Yeah, that's a whole other thing there. We said all along, if Tom DeConing is ready to play, you play him the full way and you say sorry to Mark Pitnet. Instead,
that totally goes against what you're saying, getting games in for guys. But again, I believe it is totally true in this case. Instead, they made him the sub.
Oh, what a fook.
I don't know. We've seen DeConing be able to come back after missing games more quickly. The other two are, obviously Chera's a bit older, Doherty substantially so on AFL scales. And with the soft tissue stuff with Chera, that particularly surprised me. And then Doherty, of course, 6 months after an ACL, but Tom McCollum looked like he could have and should have played the full game. And yes, Pitnet was useful for a couple goals late once the Lions had lost Jack Payne. Yeah, that's a concern going into this week. Nothing structural there, but there's such a difference for the Lions between Payne and no Payne. And I'm not even trying to make a pun there, but you could easily make them. But I felt like the Blues got the wrong guys in right away and the wrong guy on the bench. And then they subbed out the wrong guy as well. Matt Kennedy had played every game this year. He's a guy who could plug holes all over the oval. He had flown up for this game after having become a dad. Congratulations to him. And then you sub him out in the second quarter for no good reason at all when Corey Durden had done absolutely nothing. There were a few other candidates as well. Let's see here. For the Blues, 22 had fewer touches in the first half than Matt Kennedy, despite Kennedy being subbed off. Harry Mackay and Jesse Motlop had 4. Corey Durden and Brody Kemp had 3. Kennedy had 5.
I like Jesse Motlop.
And then Durden had 1 handball, 1 mark, and 1 tackle after Kennedy was subbed off. Thank you, Footy Degenerate, for that.
Who does he have naked photos of? Like, I'm sure he's a great guy. Most of these guys are great guys. But what the fuck is he doing to get in there? I mean, he's offered nothing really since 2022.
And I believe he's signed for 2 more. I think maybe it was mostly just we want another Spall in there to complement Motlop, and always is out. And against a taller team like Brisbane, you could rationalize that just if it weren't Durden.
You could have made an argument to sub Motlop out. He was very quiet. But I think you still, you want a spark plug to help create a comeback. I think there's plenty of reason to keep him in. I honestly didn't realize that Corey Durden had played in this game until I, afterwards, because I couldn't do it in real time because of spoilers, looked at the stats and was like, okay, who would have been a better decision to sub out? And I watched this closely. Genuinely did not know he played in this game.
This is like another level than Lockie Murphy. By the way, the Blues are the first club to be scoreless at quarter time of a final in 50 years.
Matt Kennedy, by the way, was the sub 3 times this year. I didn't realize that he had been in every game. I honestly would have guessed he hadn't been. I guess there were a couple times where he was the sub and like Hewitt was omitted, which made no fucking sense. I thought Hewitt was awesome. I thought he was the best midfielder for either team in this game. But like, if I'm Matt Kennedy, if you said like consider looking for a trade or something,
request it on the bench right then and there.
The problem, and I was thinking about this closely, the places he could go where he would be in a more prominent role are mostly shittier teams, except for St. Kilda. Like, he is like the exact sort of player the Saints could totally use.
How old is he? 27, 28 in April.
Like, I think he would actually like make the Saints midfield group significantly better.
Feels like an upgrade from Seb Ross, for example.
I didn't think the Lions midfield, by the way, was especially great in this game. I thought they really won the game more in the 50s. Maybe you saw it differently.
There was a lot of defensive intercepting that helped. McInerney was back there early. Andrews got his. But in terms of intercepting and rebounding, this was quite the game for Brandon Starcevich.
It's funny. I've been like the Brandon Starcevich hype man lately, and I would have put him like in terms of impact behind both Andrews and Ryan Lester. And not by Starcevich doing anything wrong. It's just Andrews and Lester were really, really good.
They weren't. Maybe it's just because I saw this as a higher level compared to average play game for Starcevich. But no, I think in terms of knowing how to pace the rebounds after the intercept and accuracy with the long kicks, this was a game that I really enjoyed out of Starcevich.
So kind of call back to the first game of the round, not quite unlike Zach Guthrie.
Maybe by comparison, it leaned a bit more toward some of the intercepts for Starcevich. I'm not sure. Let's see. How about 5 score launches for Brandon Starcevich? Only 2 actual intercept marks, but 10 intercept possessions as a whole in the game, which was tied with Lewis Young for the most.
Wow. I genuinely didn't realize that. I mean, I thought he was good, but yeah, I just saw him as kind of number 3 behind Andrews and Lester. And then in the forward half, I like Cam Rayner. I thought this was just like a pretty regular Cam Rayner game.
It was a very Cam Rayner game. It was a Joe Danaher game in some aspects as well. Oh, actually, favorite moment of this game was a Joe Danaher goal. It wasn't the bomb from 50.
He just hit a routine set shot?
No, it was the fuck this shit, I'm out goal.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
Remind me.
Little under 6 minutes left in the first quarter. Zach Bailey, who was more on top of things in this game as well. Really, just, yeah, everyone was firing for Brisbane. In terms of the smalls, Cameron got his, Lohman got his, Bailey got his, and had some full field moments too. He corralled a kick from Patrick Cripps. He hit up Eric Hipwood right in the middle of the 50. And all of the Blues converged around Logan Morris.
Just a bit of banter.
I don't know what exactly he said, but this was the first time that Carlton really lost it mentally in this game. And then Joe Danaher, he wasn't involved in any scuffle at all. And he just ran out the back with nobody else paying attention to him. Nobody at all. Eric Hipwood saw it. Handball over the top. Danaher runs in the goal. That made it 27-0.
That was also like, of course, Joe Danaher would be the one to do that. He's just kind of in his own world doing his own thing.
I was laughing like a maniac for about 2 minutes after that.
Logan Morris, another really solid game, but I thought this might have been Zach Bailey's best performance of the entire year. Like, he's had a pretty underwhelming, unremarkable season, and he's someone that I think we both like a lot. And like, if you go back and listen to some of our 2023 shows, I think we talked about him pretty extensively.
1-1 from 18 with 4 tackles and 5 marks. That's a pretty solid Zach Bailey game. He did have that 3-goal game against the Saints, but in terms of general full field involvement, this was one of his best games of the year, and especially considering the occasion. And Morris, I actually got really aggravated by Morris when he had that really easy miss, top of the goal square, and doinked it. And then Zach Bailey also whiffed the next shot from the goal line.
Yeah, that was the point where it was like, hello, put this game away. Come on, deliver the kill shot.
Kalachi did get a goal shortly after.
I thought in a game where he didn't have that many touches, I thought Achi was pretty good. I was surprised he only had 8. You definitely noticed all 8. I thought he was really sharp.
You notice his contest. He's been thrust into a lot more of a contesting role forward, obviously, with Lincoln McCarthy out.
And yeah, Hugh McCluggage, I already mentioned him. I thought he was pretty nice in this game. He was probably the best of Brisbane's main midfield group because I consider Will Ashcroft more like hybrid mid-forward.
It was more mid than forward for this game for Ashcroft, and to a very good effect.
He was the one out of the middle that I liked the most. I want to ask, when Michael Voss picked Tom de Koning to be the sub, like, what was his ideal scenario to use him in?
Bring him in for Pitnet in the second half?
Which 50, or I thought it would have been like you bring him in and I don't know. Would you have wanted it? Like, which 50 would you have wanted him in? This was both bad process and bad results.
And all the while, you also kept out your one tagging option against this midfield in Alex Chinkata.
That also seems very stupid.
The whole thing with the selection and the subbing, and then no movement to fix things being stagnant at halfback. It could have gotten Doherty involved there maybe, and nothing to limit Dane Zorko in the first half. You finally had Ali Hollins go to him in the third quarter. This is a laundry list of sackable offenses.
I mean, the way they could have won this would have been just like God-tier Cripps game, God-tier Walsh game. They could have just been bailed out by talent. Cripps was, I'd say, pretty decent. I don't think it was one of his best games, so I thought he did a good job. He was probably their second best behind Hewitt, who, again, I thought was really good. Like, even as they were getting clapped, I think he was among the 3 or 5 best players.
Yeah, they lost this at selection, and then they just sealed their fate even more in terms of the actual strategic calls. Never mentioned, by the way, the other worst strategic call of Finals Week 1, which was Jason Horne-Francis starting on the bench.
And he spent a lot of time on the bench.
He spent the first 7 minutes of the game on the bench. He was on the bench at the start of the second quarter also. Explain.
You know, I've at times questioned Michael Voss. You know, I've pretty much always questioned Hinckley and Beveridge, and this was not a good week for coaches that I've doubted. Once again, we feel pretty smart for this.
I mean, I don't think we're alone, but also, yes. Let's talk about some awards for the week. You know, obviously no AFL nominations, because even though the medals for Mark and Goal of the Year are named because of grand final plays. The only finals marks and goals aren't eligible for said awards.
But we had a good batch of both marks and goals that, well, let me start with this. The second goal kicked in finals is better than any goal kicked in the entire home and away season, and it's not close. Also, the actual nominees that were picked for goal of the year were underwhelming. Mark of the year, there were some quality ones. I'd say this year's mark candidates were largely better than last year's, but we also had 3 really good ones this week. So, Benjamin, you want to take us through the mark of the year?
Yeah, sure. Your round 24 mark of the week was Logan Morris with the knee to Jaden Laverty's head. That was not really a spectacular crop of marks at all. By the way, Logan Morris, legacy built by Macca's. It's like Matthew Judon, body built by Taco Bell.
I know McDonald's has ads with, just like a bunch of footy players in them, but I think you could do like a really neat, like narrative type commercial about his debut. Like, come on, guys.
They ought to for 2025 for sure. Your finals week 1 nominees for marks. Ollie Dempsey got his knee to the back of Jace Burgoyne's head. James Harms had both knees on Carl Amon's left shoulder. And then there's the winner, Isaac Heaney, hanging on Jack Buckley's left shoulder with his right knee. I mean, you have a case for that for being the mark of the year if you're going to count finals. That's up there with Jamie Elliott over Ben Mackay. And props to Jack Buckley for making sure Heaney didn't completely destroy himself by grabbing him partially on the dismount.
I would still put this probably third for the whole year behind Bobby Hill as well. And I would also make Dempsey the number 2 out of this round. It goes Harms third, Dempsey second, Heaney first. That seems like a pretty easy and not controversial ranking. Goal of the week, round 24. It was, of course, the Jack Higgins game winner. Your nominees that we picked for this week. Normally I do them in chronological order, but I'll give the other 2 first because there's an obvious winner and it was the earliest of them chronologically. Cal Sherdeer dribbles with the left and then soccers with the right from the left boundary against James O'Donnell. That was pretty cool. Isaac Heaney on one bounce from 70 to tie the game late for the Swans from inside the center square.
Fuck, I can't believe that.
The obvious winner here is Jeremy Cameron, though. This was such an easy choice. He took an Ollie Henry handball, ran to the left boundary, got away from Travis Boak, and then kicked on his left from the left around both himself and Alir. This was like one of the most ridiculous goals I've ever seen. And not just because it was in a final. I mean, this would be in the running. I don't know if it would have beaten Will Ashcroft last year, but it was really good.
I think James Brayshaw's radio call might just have to go into our intro for next year.
On the up, Cameron. Around the body. Cheers on!
Yes, thank you. Great call on that.
I don't know who to take out, though. Maybe I will just have to extend the intro then, because that's an amazing call.
Like, it was great even without the call. It was just an awesome play in the moment. But then you add that on, and it's like, this was better than anything you could have asked for. Like, I'm surprised that play hasn't made it into, like, mainstream American circles or, like a House of Highlights type page or something like that.
Your Round 24 main character was Carlton for Brad burying their way into finals. You could consider them, in a sordid way, a candidate for the Finals Week 1 main character. I think your runner-up here is Nick Watson for his first 4-goal game and just all the wizardry and whatnot from the fans. But I feel like it's got to be Isaac Heaney, who's your actual main character of Finals Week 1, the do-it-all performance with the highlights.
Oh, I thought we were going to leave it up to a vote, but okay.
Nah, this feels pretty crystal to me.
Do you want to do this like the Venezuelan government and pretend we gave it to a vote and then like have the vote totals add up to 105%?
Wasn't it like 111?
I thought it was 105. Either way, there are ways to like cheat and do fake election results without looking like something out of a sitcom. Like which show is it with the straight to jail guy?
Oh yeah, the Fred Armisen Parks and Rec scene.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with anything, but Venezuela's people are awesome and their government is bad.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
So congrats to all the teams that got the chocolates at the pointy end of the season and cracking games. We'll be back with you like we alluded to earlier. Since there are only a couple of games to preview, we are going to do our post-mortems. Basically, not quite like a So You Didn't Crack the 8, but a review of the teams who are no longer with us.
That'll be to you a couple days after this episode is out. Until then, he's at Castle Media. His cat is at Cat Named Grind on Instagram. I am at Benjamin HK01. We are all at Americans Footy. And I gotta go to bed because I gotta be in a first grade class tomorrow.
Fucking nerd.